Welcome back to Monster in My Closet, the podcast where we shine a light on the professional world's darker corners. I'm Anil Saxena, joined by my co-host, the founder of Medusas, Morgan Hunter. Each episode, we tackle the fears and faux pas that haunt our work lives, with insights, interviews, and a dash of humor, some stupid analogies, and probably swearing. So if you've ever felt like you're navigating a workplace labyrinth, a never-ending approval process, an evil hall of mirrors, or a constantly ending quarter, you're in the right place. Let's confront those monsters together. Are you ready? Let's begin. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Monster in My Closet. So today, Morgan, are we scared or scary?
We're scary in a very passive-aggressive kind of way.
Yes, we actually had to decide on whether or not we were scared or scary, because you could be scary if you're passive-aggressive, or you could be scared because somebody's being passive-aggressive. I don't know.
Right.
It's a choose-your-own-adventure monster in my closet. Are you the monster, or are you not monster? Anyway, okay, so today, in an episode we're calling Witchy Words and Phrases, in this eerie installment, we're going to invoke the dark arts of communication, those witchy words and phrases that cast a passive-aggressive spell over the office. It goes without saying, obviously, needless to say, these seemingly innocuous incantations can conjure up confusion and foster resentment. We'll share the bone-chilling anecdotes and unravel the sinister psychology behind these verbal hexes. So there's three things we want to cover today. So first, what are some of the origins of these words? And specifically, what's the origin and meaning behind "it goes without saying"? And we're going to touch on the history and the intended meaning of it. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the manipulative nature of assumptive phrases and explore how phrases like "it goes without saying" can be passive-aggressive or manipulative. And finally, we'll take a look at strategies and promote direct and honest communication and offer some tips and foster a culture of clarity and openness. So, Morgan, what's the genesis here behind this topic today? Not only because we're both Gen Xers and we're kind of sarcastic and passive-aggressive by nature. I think it's genetic, right? But there is more history than that. So what's the genesis here?
Yeah, for me, the whole "it goes without saying" is it often comes up if I'm going to a boss, and there's been multiple, so I'm not pointing anyone out in particular. But it's like, I don't feel recognized. I feel like, my work is not valued. And on a number of occasions, the response was, well, it goes without saying. Does it? Does it though? I mean, I'm coming to you telling you that I don't feel appreciated, and you're telling me it goes without saying. So, I mean, right there, that's the problem. So then I started thinking about, like, what is the psychology behind the person who's saying it goes without saying, right? Because when you look at the etymology of that phrase, as a French word, it literally means it goes without saying. But it was meant originally for things that are blatantly obvious. So, if someone gets hit by a car and the bystander says they're going to need medical help, and someone says, well, that goes without saying. So that is kind of like the blatantly obvious. I think in the modern world, in business, when someone says it goes without saying, it's almost like, well, I didn't say something, but I'm going to make you feel dumb by saying it goes without saying. So I look like I was thinking about it all along, but now I'm just now doing it. I started thinking how tricky those words are, and that there's a whole bunch of other words and phrases that we use in the workplace that just kind of make it weird and confusing for people.
Yeah. And I think it's actually really important because now that there are so many of us that are kind of knowledge workers, and for those of you listening, I'm using air quotes, knowledge workers, that notion of having clarity about what we're thinking and doing and the approach that we want to take and the outcomes that we want to have, I think they're really, really important. And we've talked about in other episodes, and we'll likely talk about in future episodes, that the world of work is really fast paced. So I think sometimes people use these words as like heuristics or brain tricks to kind of skip over some of the stuff that probably really needs clarification. For those of you that are listening that remember Seinfeld, there was a whole like episode on yada yada yada, and that the most important thing that people was in the yada yada yada. You're like, what? So
Yes.
right. I mean, I think that's something that we really need to consider as we're thinking about using these words and not being passive aggressive in how we're approaching the world of work. What do you think what are some of the examples? I mean, you did a lot of good research on this topic. What are some of the words that you've seen on the list of that may be considered passive aggressive?
Yeah, obviously, right? Obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
Needless to say, as you know, and there's one on the list that I use. I'm just gonna say it, as I'm sure you are aware, and then whatever, like keep saying it. We can unpack the psychology behind that phrase, but it's like, as you know, it's a given. Of course, it's those things that are like, okay, we're assuming knowledge here, and it really kind of opens up a gap of what needs to be said.
Yeah, yeah, and I think and there's a bunch of other words, and I think I would love to hear if folks have other phrases, other terminology that they feel like really gets in the way and could be passive aggressive. So what is it about those words and phrases that kind of makes us feel that notion of it being passive aggressive?
I think sometimes it can just be the way it's delivered. You can say, of course I care about you, that kind of thing.
Right.
Or it's like, do I need to work late? Well, of course you do, right? So those are like, of course, in two different ways. Feels very, very different on the receiving end of those things. So I think as the speaker, you can kind of, monitor yourself if you have those capabilities. Some of us don't. But I think also they are, like you said, kind of shortcuts to get to an end state, and you're in a hurry and you're saying, okay, blah blah blah, the rules here, how this rolls, etc. But I really feel like it's okay to tap the brakes if you're a listener in this scenario. So if someone is going too fast, you have a leader who's trying to explain something with these types of linguistic devices. I hear, of course, or I hear it goes without saying, but I want to make sure I'm perfectly clear so I can give you the result you want, right? I want to make sure that I am 100% sure. So tapping the brakes and just saying, whoa, wait a minute, it's not clear to everybody, is always a good step.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important for people to kind of think about, well, do I really understand what is in the unsaid? So I think that's a really kind of, that's an interesting thing that these, I looked up the word heuristic yesterday, so I keep wanting to use the word.
Do it.
Interesting.
Do a drinking game.
But I think it's like a mental trick that people utilize, and sometimes it's not a bad thing to talk, when somebody uses a phrase like that, to ask them questions about, I hear you say that, but I'm not exactly sure what you mean. And I remember when I was at a former employer a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I had hired a new person who my boss didn't like, didn't want me to hire. She wanted me to hire.
Oh my God, I've been there.
Right. And she said some things to me during the hiring process, like, obviously, this is the better candidate. And, it goes without saying that they have the kind of experience that you're looking for. And needless to say, they did not. Needless to say, they did not. And obviously, I did not hire them. And so this person was not happy with me. And so she had asked that we complete something. And I said, does it need to be done this week? And she said, well, obviously, we have a meeting on Monday, and so it needs to be done this week. And so we ended up staying late night on a Friday, had to take taxis back into the city because we worked in the suburbs and the trains were off. Mm-hmm. And it ended up that they didn't even utilize what we had put together. And so but I blame myself for not getting clarity on, well, are you going to actually use this? What's the topic of the conversation? How are we going to leverage this information? And if I got it to you on, end of day on Monday, would that be okay? So I think that it's important that we spend a little bit of time getting clarity when we have a question about what the words mean, instead of assuming that it's got a particular intent.
It's interesting. That's a really interesting story, because I feel like sometimes those phrases are meant to shut you down. When she said to you, well, obviously, that's kind of drawing a line under it. Like, we're not discussing this any further, right? Because it's so obvious that you're working this weekend. So I think that what I would say to the listeners is that don't get shut down by realize what's happening to you when someone says, obviously, blah, blah, blah. Don't get shut down over that, right? So you do need to ask the additional questions. So, you're beating yourself up a little bit. I should have, blah, blah, blah. But she was intentionally trying to shut you down so you couldn't have those conversations. So you would have needed to realize that. So
yeah. And I mean, she definitely was. Yeah. But I think that it's important that you start to kind of peel the onion back. So Cherie is really good at asking me, like, do you really have to do this? Do you really have to do this? Even though it's something about work. There's one other anecdote that I remember, which is a weird word to me, anecdote, when you're telling a story. Like, it sounds like you're taking medicine. Anyway, so I was working for a company and I was just about to reveal, right? Like, I'm so bad at this. I was working for a company and the team was new and we were doing an offsite. And the person in charge was like, well, tonight we're going to have an outing and we're going to go to this game and, do some bonding. And I told Cherie, I'm like, well, I got to go to this thing to do the thing. And she said, do you really have to go? Like, do you have to be there? What if you didn't go? What would happen? And it didn't even dawn on me because he was like, obviously everybody's going to attend. We're a new team, blah, blah, blah. And I went to him and I said, you know what? I'm not going because I don't want to. And I have a long drive back home and, but I'll be here early to get the day started tomorrow. And he looked at me and he laughed and he was like, sure, that's fine. And so I had all this angst because he had said, well, obviously, everybody's going to go. Right.
Yeah.
So It's interesting how those words trigger us in that particular context of work, because we feel like we have this obligation to do everything everybody says because they have the title. Well, it's my vice president. Like, well, it's the dictator of the organization, so I must do what they say. Like, no, you don't. Like, just fucking do what you want to do within reason.
Yes. So let's talk about why we might use these words other than like a shortcut.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, and I'm guilty of using some of this language. So I want to be super clear, so write it in the notes. I heard Morgan say, of course, and I was probably being a smartass about it. But one of the things that I found in my research is this idea of conflict avoidance. So let's say you're a manager and you've gotten some edict on high from the CEO of the company. I'm going to make it high stakes. And it's urgent, right? So you say, well, of course, we're going to need to work through the weekend to get this done, right? So that person is trying to say, hey, this isn't really up for debate, and I can't get into a conflict because it wasn't my idea. It was this person's idea, and we're just going to have to make this happen. Like, we're in it together. So sometimes those words are kind of meant to soften a conflict, which I totally get, especially if you're asking people to do something is going to be super impactful and uncomfortable for them to do. But also it can be due to a lack of self-confidence, right? So maybe someone's not comfortable in their role, they're new in their role, and they're using those kind of words to kind of soften what otherwise would have been kind of a direct request. They're kind of going this sideways to kind of soften the request a little bit. And then, obviously we've talked about the stuff like, no, you're just being passive aggressive, or we're moving fast, or whatever. So what are some of the situations that you've seen, Anil, where the situations where people might use those words, even yourself, if you would like to use yourself as an example?
Even yourself, as if you know that I've done this already, and obviously you've used those words. So I think that you bring up a couple of really good points about as a leader, right? There are times where you are put in a position to tell people something or ask them something that you're not comfortable with. So in instances like that, I have definitely used those kinds of words a little bit to shut down any kind of argument about whether or not we want to do it, and then also because I don't necessarily agree with what's happening or why we're doing something. So I think one of the things that's really important as a leader, as you're thinking about using these words and falling into this trap, is that you want to try to understand for yourself what's behind the utilization of that word, and try to be a little transparent in terms of your feeling about whatever it is that you're saying, because you're a person, you're a human being with feelings and actions, and it is not up to you to blindly follow orders, right? There are some things that you have to do, right? Like you got to turn in your timesheet or your expense report by the end of the month, or you're not going to get paid. That's life, right? There are other things that you have to stop at a red light. There's no debate about that. Well, I didn't really want to stop. I didn't feel like it. It didn't really look red to me. Like all of those things, that's not a negotiable, but you don't have to like it. So I think those are the instances where I've used it. I think the other thing is that when I have told people things multiple times about the way that they're acting or how they're showing up, and they don't change, or it doesn't feel like they're listening to me, that I use those words as well, because I don't want to tell them that they're a fucking moron. And if it was up to me, I would throw them out, right? It's to couch the sort of the veiled politeness, right? That you're trying to that you're trying to achieve. Those are definitely times.
That's the aggressive story I've ever heard. I love it. Thank you for bringing that example to the table.
Right? It's so that I don't have to tell people I hate them, right? Obviously, it's sort of like, right? Bless your heart. Sort of, I feel like I've heard it was like fuck you, right? So
exactly. So let's circle back to the situations where the person delivering the information is not being passive aggressive. Let's just say they're like super busy. What I want to do, like, you're right, as someone who's delivering a message, you need to be very careful to not use oblique words. And it's particularly important when you have people that may have neurodiversity on your team, and using weird words and phrases is even more confusing for them. And you just need to be as direct as possible and as clear as possible to your people. So that's the management responsibility. But as a listener, I want to just give everyone permission. If someone says something that you don't understand, just say, I don't understand. Can you explain that to me in a different way? Or maybe you think you understand what they're saying, but you're not entirely sure because it's so crazy, right? So, it's like, just so I'm clear.
That's a Morganism. Just so you know, everybody, like that phrase, and if somebody says something in a meeting and she says, just so I'm clear, then there's like an uppercut coming, like just an elbow that's going to come right at him, like, just so I'm clear.
He comes back and go, this is really the request, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that we have that recorded, in case anyone comes after me personally, I'm covered.
Right. No, but I think what you're saying is absolutely accurate, that as a listener, right, it is up to you really make sure that you are clear, not just because you want to call somebody out on something, but it's also because you want to use your time wisely, right? Like, you want to make sure that the action that you're taking is actually going to get the result that's intended.
If it's a huge weekend or whatever, it's like, throw that away, ask questions.
Exactly. And I think it actually could lead to better outcomes if you're kind of thinking about, well, what is that? I know you said obviously, and maybe I'm dense, but I don't understand what it is that you're asking, or what the intended outcome is going to be, or could we just unpack that a little bit more, or things like that. So it's important to make sure that you give yourself the latitude to do that. And we've said in previous episodes about like questions, like you want to give yourself permission to ask questions, because it's likely if you have the question, other people do as well.
And sometimes I think in organizations that are growing really quickly, there may be new people. And so what is obvious or goes without saying for people that have been around for 3 years may be completely not visible or understandable by someone who's only been in an organization for 3 months. So I think as your cohort of leaders around you, you also I feel like you need to jump in and ask an obvious question from time to time, to clarify for those people who may not feel like they're comfortable asking that question. If I'm a brand new person and they're saying, obviously, blah, 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 not everyone has the guts to say, I don't know what obvious means because I've only been here for 2 days. So sometimes you just kind of got to be aware as a fellow leader and go, hey, I'm going to tap the brakes here. And can we go a little more detail on that? Because we have so many new people here, or we have new people on the team, maybe not just to the company, or it's been 6 months since we talked about this last, or, any of the number of reasons.
That's really, really good insight, that as part of an organization, sometimes it's really important to step up to help people who you think may not kind of understand what's being said or what's in the unsaid. One of the things that's really important about onboarding, in my opinion, is this notion of helping people understand what's really being said when things are said. Because there's this underlying current of, after you've been here for a while, you kind of know the shortcuts, right? And why people laugh at certain things or don't laugh at certain things. And I think that's a really good point, that you want to make sure that you're taking care of that. And your point about neurodiversity is super important, because as we bring more people into our organizations, that are different, that have different ways of communicating, the need for clarity is vastly increased. I think about even people from different countries, right? English is a stupid language. It's like, if you look up the word run, it's got 23 different definitions. How the fuck does that happen? Why don't we just have one definition of that word? But when you're speaking to a group of people that have a lot of different backgrounds, that's why that's so important, to make sure that you're adding that level of clarity so that those witchy words don't get in the way and you don't have people running in a bunch of different directions. I think that's another really important thing to do, and to make sure that you're thinking about what you're going to say and you're thinking about what's been said, right? Like, am I sure that that's what Morgan meant?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I was thinking about another weird phrase that honestly, it confuses me. When people tell me to do the best you can,
yeah,
I struggle with that. It's like, hey, I'm going into a weekend. My in-laws are coming into town, whatever. I've been given a big assignment. I don't know how I'm going to get it done. And my boss says, do the best you can.
Well, here's what I would hear when somebody says do the best you can, would be, I hear that you think that you may not get it done, but I need you to get it done anyway. That's what I'm hearing.
Right. So, but also, you could best you can. Maybe they think the actual opposite. It's like, I understand. Do the best you can. Right. So maybe it was a minimal effort required, but I blew off my in-laws the entire weekend and wrecked my marriage because I'm doing the best that I can.
Exactly.
Thing done. So I just ask people to be very clear in their language.
It's funny. Right? Well, but here's what's interesting. Like, that's actually a phrase that I use with Cherie. I feel like I'm unveiling a lot of things. Anyway, so I say that, like, she'll bring something up to me and I'll say, I'll do the best that I can, which means, like, I heard you. I will do it. It may not be up to your standards, but I will do it. So when I say it, it is 100% passive aggressive. It is. It's like, and so I think that it's important that when you're thinking about what you're going to say, that you are cognizant of, like, what's the actual meaning of the words that I'm using, because you could avoid a lot by.
I love that. So wondering, as we get towards the close, do you have a favorite passive aggressive phrase that you use?
I think I've revealed. I'll do the best that I can.
Yeah.
But I think the one that has been used on me that I think it just makes my skin crawl when I hear it is someone at my level or someone at that level. It's this kind of belief that, well, somebody at that level, I mean, obviously you're going to need to up your game.
I think that my favorite passive aggressive phrase is, I'll give it the attention it deserves.
Yes, that is a Morganism too, I have to say. That is the sort of like, fuck you. Yeah.
I mean, maybe it deserves a lot of attention. I don't know.
Maybe it does. I think I would love to hear what people's favorite passive aggressive saying is.
Yes. Please leave us comments.
Yes.
Please leave us comments. We are doing very deep dive on the show notes now. So all of the stuff that we talk about in the podcast and the research that we do is going to be showing up in those show notes. So if you want to learn all the possible passive aggressive phrases so you can use them in the workplace, there'll be a list for you.
Yeah. We want to give you all the ammunition that we can. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of Monster in My Closet. We've enjoyed this conversation, obviously. So I hope that you guys all have a great week, and we'll see you again real soon. As we wrap up another episode here at Monster in My Closet,
We want to thank you, our fearless listeners, for joining us on this journey of exploring what scares us or when we're scary. Professionally, of course. Together, we've ventured deep into the workplace wilderness armed with humor, insights, and a touch of irreverence, and hopefully learned something together along the way. But our journey doesn't end here. Monster in My Closet is proud to be part of Medusas.org. Medusas is a membership-driven, non-profit organization serving underrepresented groups, minorities, and individuals with disabilities who are doing business in the software-as-a-service space. We're a community created by SaaS professionals, for SaaS professionals, and even the SaaS curious. Visit Medusas.org to discover how you can contribute to a movement that empowers professionals to face their workplace monsters head-on. Don't forget to subscribe, share with your colleagues, and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us shine a light on the monsters lurking in the professional closet, making our community braver, stronger, and a little bit wiser. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo, embrace the journey, and remember, no monster is too big when we face it together. Cheers.